Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast as we are now going to be diving into the game between the Houston Texans and Buffalo Bills. This was being labeled as the Stefon Diggs revenge game coming into the week. We got a little bit of that, I suppose. Diggs had a fine game for himself. Ultimately, it was 6 receptions for 82 yards, no touchdowns. He was fine. This was more so about Diggs. I don't know. I'm not ready to say he was proven right about some of the comments he made about Josh Allen. But, he sent out a little bit of cryptic messages of, what are we sure that Josh Allen is going to look great once he no longer has a wide receiver one? And through the first few weeks, Josh Allen was the early MVP favorite and by a significant margin at that as well. But I do think there was also a little bit of an understanding as a whole from at the NFL community, at least the ones that were maybe a little bit more rational, that there were still going to be challenges to come with this Bills roster, that the fact that they are sort of up against it in terms of having some of these other teams just outclassing them from an on-paper, talent comparison. And I think that we definitely saw that in this game. And specifically, we're seeing with the Bills offense really what it looks like, having this lack of a number one weapon for Josh Allen to lean on, especially having Khalil Shakir out in this game. That was definitely a big loss for them. But even if there isn't a true number one wide receiver that has great game-breaking talents, this was a very bad game from Josh Allen. 9 of 30, 131 yards, and 1 touchdown. Added another 54 yards on the ground. So, we understand that he is capable of making big-time plays. And when the Bills' offense was starting to heat up in the third quarter, it was in large part due to Josh Allen. That being said, He left a lot of chances out there on the table. I thought especially so in the first half where you just see the inaccuracies with him. And yeah, sure, there's a play, on a deep shot to Mac Hollins where I thought that his throw was off. Mac Hollins probably could have played that one better, and it was likely going for a touchdown had they converted there, but both parties should be held responsible. That's kind of where you start to get those specific cases of, okay, Josh Allen, you are now the highest paid player on the roster. As a result, you're going to have to work with lesser targets, and you gotta just be a little bit more precise with some of these passes, and he just was not in this game. There was that deep shot to Mac Hollins. There was another one where Hollins was wide open in the middle of the field on a 3rd and long. Now, at that point, Allen was rolling out of the pocket, so not an easy throw necessarily. But again, the inaccuracies with him were very much on display in this game. And, if this is the worst game you're ever going to get from Josh Allen, it is a statement about how, he still has a very high floor. I would argue that he can still, get you real impactful plays even when he's not at his sharpest. And we didn't see him turn the ball over as well. So it's not like that was an issue either that, got in the way. It's not like you were getting the hair on fire Josh Allen that was, making overzealous plays and making mistakes there. It's just, you got a little bit of an erratic version of him in this game, and that's with having an actual decent rushing attack in this game as well. James Cook, 20 carries for 82 yards, 4.1 yards per carry, a touchdown there. So, they were moving the ball decently well on the ground. It's just the semblance of a passing game was non-existent for the second straight week, and that's something you can't have with Josh Allen. And again, I do understand that they are a limited receiver core, especially without Shakir, but you do have a couple tight ends that I think are positive assets to you in Dalton Kincaid and in Dawson Knox. Both of them, I think, are at least, viable options for you. Keon Coleman, just one catch, and it was on that 49-yard touchdown where he was just able to burn the defenders. But, not very much success there with Keon Coleman. 5 targets and didn't really pay off for them. Like I mentioned, a couple missed shots to Mac Hollins. That this game was fully on the passing game and on the coaching as well, of course. If you didn't catch any of it as well, the very Spark Notes version of this would be the fact that the Bills got the ball back with 30 seconds left in regulation, backed up on their own 3-yard line, and I really do not know what the thought process was, and I'm sure McDermott and Allen have commented on it post-game, but the fact that they, from their own 3-yard line, basically no timeouts either, so the scoring upside was pretty much non-existent, that they threw 3 straight incompletions, at least, one of them was almost intercepted on that first throw. They end up shanking a punt that puts the Texans about 5 yards away from field goal range, and they end up getting walked off. I don't know. Again, if you have seen it, I'm going to look into it more myself, but feel free to let us know in the comment section if you have any thoughts on that situation or if you've seen anything specific from Sean McDermott. But that was a disastrous decision. I mean, it had Scott Hansen of Red Zone out of his mind confused based off of how that went down. So, as much, definitely on the passing game, I'd throw coaching in there as well. I thought the defense played more than well enough to win this game. There was the one busted coverage on that Nico Collins touchdown that, was a difference maker for sure for them. But ultimately, I mean, they did a pretty good job of, bottling up the offense, forced a couple turnovers. There was C.J. Stroud fumbling on a strip sack, and he threw an interception at one point as well. So being able to hold on like they were against the Texans felt pretty good to me. And, the running attack really wasn't great for Houston. That was the one area. You saw Terrell Bernard, the linebacker, come back in, who had been dealing with a pec injury since that Dolphins game in week 2, that he was able to play. He, had a solid contribution in this game. I thought the defense was pretty good. And that's what I do want to continue to give Sean McDermott credit for, is the way that they've been able to step up. Christian Benford has been one of the more improved players, I think, at least from a standout perspective of me just watching on a regular basis, that Benford has done a pretty good job, all things considered, throughout this season. And I think that, after having so much offloading of secondary talent during this past offseason, that he's been very much needed for them, of having a positive impact for them. You have Dorian Williams, who has really taken on a bigger role. Specifically, it was when Bernard got hurt in that Week 2 matchup against the Dolphins that Dorian Williams has been able to step into a bigger role, and he's proving himself to the point where Bernard is back in this game, and Dorian Williams is still getting significant snaps for them. So there are positives for the Bills out of all of this, but in terms of the passing game, it's hard to come up with any that they need to be better. Now, quickly here on the Texans side of this game, I think that, again, we are definitely seeing that this is a version of an offense that needs to be better, and specifically the area of improvement for them, I think, is having more success running the ball. Haven't really been able to do that since Joe Mixon left with an injury on that Sunday night game in Week 2. Sounds like he's coming towards a return. That, Cam Akers has been fine for them, I suppose, in these past couple weeks. I thought that he showed, some moments in that Vikings game on individual runs, even though the overarching stats weren't all that great for him. This game, 9 carries, 42 yards, and a touchdown. So, he's been somewhat productive for them. Agumbawale as well, at least is... this game was not the game for him. He's at least been a part of the offense, but, averaged just 2 yards per carry on 15 attempts in this game as well. So I think that Joe Mixon will round them out a lot better. Dameon Pierce, we'll see, again, because now at this point they have so many names in that running back room that it'll be interesting to see who really takes over for them. But I do feel like, generally speaking, the Texans are still making pretty good pace. It was an ugly, ugly loss, absolutely, for them to the Vikings a few weeks ago. But since then, they have, been able to win ugly, which I suppose is, I'm going to choose to at least look at it, of their defense has been very impressive this year. And I think it's a step up from last year where they were able to sort of, overcome, it seems like up to this point at least, some key losses. Blake Cashman and Jonathan Grenard, both players that left. You replace, you at least replace Grenard with Daniil Hunter, who's been a big impact player for them. Henry To'o taking on a bigger role at that linebacker position. So, they've been pretty good, all things considered. And the Texans, still look a little bit young at times. CJ Stroud, a little bit more of a turnover bug, but that was, based off of last year where he was historically great for a rookie in terms of not turning the ball over. That, there are growing pains. Opposing teams have a little bit more film. I'm not worried about the Texans. I mean, the Texans are very firmly in that, not that we're going to do power rankings right now, especially since the week isn't over, but the Texans are, in that conversation for being a top 5 team in the NFL. They're in a division that I think is basically theirs for the taking at this point. Now that the Colts, I know the Colts with Flacco have built up maybe a little bit of momentum over the past couple of weeks. Ultimately, I don't think that team's in the hunt, and the Texans should be able to pretty easily cruise their way into a playoff spot. But it's more than just that for them. I think that from here on out, trying to do whatever you can and taking advantage of those divisional matchups, the number one most important thing for them in this as a whole is to take care of business, put yourself in the best possible position for potentially getting that 1 seed. We'll see how things shake out here. They are second in the conference right now behind the Kansas City Chiefs, but they have, had a significantly better strength of schedule up to this point. They have more winnable games on the schedule, in my opinion, in relation to the Chiefs. So, if they can find a way to get home field advantage throughout the playoffs, I think it would be massive for CJ Stroud and a team that, is now very talented, but is still, relatively new into the being ultra competitive scene. So I think that would be a huge mark for them. But let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section. We are going to be continuing on here with our NFL coverage, and I want to dive into the mess that currently is the New England Patriots, where, they lose another game big. You have the head coach and Gerard Mayo making some interesting comments about the starting quarterback position moving forward, and on top of all of it as well, one of their best players in Jabril Peppers gets arrested on Saturday. So we're going to dive into the bit of a mess that the New England Patriots currently are. But before we do so, we are going to take a quick break. Do not go anywhere. We will be right back.